So, Garth, I got to start by asking, given how incredibly busy you are, why did you need to write this book?
Why did I need to write this book? Well, it's actually kind of an interesting thing. I had a kind of life changing experience, I guess you would say. I really almost came face to face with the error of my ways and a realization that I was doing medicine wrong, that I was thinking about disease wrong. And I had actually written a book where I told people to follow recommendations that were probably making them sick. And I felt like I had to right that wrong.
So, tell us a little bit about the life changing experience.
The whole study of medicine's kind of different. Like there's this thought that possibly doctors want to keep people sick, and that's not true. Everybody I knew wanted to make people better. But the way we're taught is to look at the disease itself and not at the person. Like our battle is with the disease. Like, for instance, you'd be on rounds and they'd be talking about the colon cancer in room 202, not Mrs. Smith. And Mrs. Smith would have 10 different doctors, right? There's a doctor for her neurology, a neurologist. There'd be a doctor for her kidney, and a nephrologist, a cardiologist, and each is looking at their own system, and no one's looking at the person as a whole. And so this is a very weird way now, in retrospect, of looking at disease. It's looking only at the disease process. You hear it said a lot, and it's absolutely true, that healthcare is really about sick care. It's not about keeping someone healthy or making someone healthy or preventing someone from getting sick. It's about treating an illness when it comes along. And so my whole mindset was almost like the human body is built broken. And it's my job to fix it using the skills that I've been taught. And I never really thought outside of that box.
So, what got you thinking outside of that box?
Well, it was several things all kind of coming together at one time. I had become a weight loss surgeon, and I was giving people instructions on how to lose weight. But I wasn't, my understanding of why someone became overweight and how to lose weight were very rudimentary. I didn't really study that part of it. I studied how to cut someone open, what's the best surgery to do for weight loss and how to treat that. And the weight loss surgery works, and it works really well. It probably works too well because it's worked so well now that we're not concentrating anymore on preventing obesity. We're concentrating on how to treat obesity. I go to obesity conferences. I would sit in an obesity conference. We'd sit there for a week. An obesity conference, right? We would not mention food once. There wouldn't be a single lecture on food. All we would be talking about is someone's overweight, what can we do about it? And if the surgery, and the problem is in the beginning when I first started doing it, when the surgery was kind of fresh, it was all about the success stories. But about 5, 6 years into it, 7 years into it, we started talking about what about the patients that start to fail? Because there you are sitting there and you're like, oh my God, my solution to everything didn't work. And so we would have these discussions. What do you do in that situation? And everybody was like, well, we got to do more surgery. But that started to seem weird to me. The surgery didn't work, so I'm going to do more surgery to fix it. On the flip side, I also went to get my eyes examined. And the optometrist was examining my eyes and she said, I'm a little worried. Like, why are you worried? She's like, well, you have arcus senilis, which is something that old people get where you start to get cholesterol deposits around the outside of the eyes. And she said that, and I kind of didn't really believe her or really think much of it. But I did have to get lab tested around that time because I was having a baby, and I wanted to get a life insurance policy. The life insurance policy guy calls me back. He says, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you kind of failed the test. Like they won't give you the best plan. And so I was kind of confused by this, and I looked at my labs. My liver function tests were elevated because I had fatty liver. I had very high cholesterol. I had high blood pressure. And then I started coming to think about it. I was like, I had been feeling really bad. I had horrible irritable bowel syndrome, constant belly problems. I'd gone to GI doctors. They gave me medicines. After I got this diagnosis of the high cholesterol, hypertension, and fatty liver, I went to a medical doctor. No big deal. Here's medicines. And, I told people many times in my life, look, you've got high blood pressure, you've got high cholesterol. And we've become so accepting of disease. We just kind of figure it's a rite of passage. Like I thought, well, this was going to happen. It happened a little earlier to me than I thought it would. I was only 35, but it was bound to happen. So, okay, so I've got high cholesterol. But then I just kind of stopped and said, is this how it's supposed to be? Are we built with this lemon of a body and the only answer is medicine? And more importantly, are there other people in this world that have figured this out? So are there other people in the world that haven't had these disease processes? And when I started following that path, everything changed.
So what was the first thing you discovered that started to blow your mind?
You get out of medical school and you have this feeling like you've been given this unbelievable power. Like nothing can beat Western medicine. Nothing can beat this institution with all. I mean, you get a headache, I could get a CAT scan on you in 5 minutes. You have a brain tumor, we could have it out by the next day. How can you beat that? But I started looking at data about our health. And what I found is we were the most overweight country in the world. We have the highest rate of cancer. We have the highest rate of hypertension and the shortest longevity. That's what really got me. How could America have the shortest longevity? I mean, we're a Western society with every imaginable amenity you can have to keeping yourself healthy. How could we be dying at an earlier age in other countries? As I looked at the data, we're dying 10 years earlier. And there's data coming out that our kids are going to be the first generation that live a shorter life than we do. And then I started looking at, well, what are these other countries doing? If we're so bad, what are the other countries doing? But they do certain things different to us. And the one big thing that really jumped out at me is they eat a very different diet than we do. And what I looked at, one thing I really focused on, if you look at my old book, Expert's Guide to Weight Loss Surgery, I was telling people, eat protein. Eat your protein first. This is a bariatric surgery kind of phenomena. In bariatric surgery, the only diet recommendation you're ever going to get is eat protein and fill yourself up on protein and make sure that's the first thing you eat before you eat anything else. That's what I've been telling people for years. But you go and look at Okinawa, where they don't have these disease processes that we have, and lo and behold, they're hardly eating any protein. It's only about 7 to 8% of their diet. And in fact, when you look at the National Geographic did a study where they went around the world looking at the healthiest cultures in the world. And when you look at those cultures, they actually all of them eat it's a very different diet, but fairly similar components. And those components are starches, fruits, vegetables, and beans, especially beans. What's missing from all of those diets that we eat mostly is animal products and processed products. And so in Okinawa and Sardinia and the Seventh-day Adventists, they're not eating steak and chicken. Very occasionally they'll have meat, only on very rare occasions. But the vast majority of the staples of their diet tend to be plants. And that was a huge finding for me. And then I really started doing the research. I mean, really looking into epidemiology, into benchtop research, into the hypothesis that can a plant-based diet protect us, and then finding that, in fact, it definitely can. And that really changed my health, the health of my family, and eventually the health of my patients.
Gotcha. So one more question about the very strange title of the book. It's rare that a book invents a word, but you did.
Proteinaholic.
What does that come? What does proteinaholic mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I call it proteinaholic because people just seem addicted to this notion of protein. It's like they have to get the protein, and no matter what someone tells them, they tell them, "Oh, I don't have a problem. I need the protein. It's supposed to be part of my diet," and they just can't get away from it. And I came up with it because, as I discovered that a plant-based diet is extremely important to a healthy life. I started counseling people on eating a plant-based diet. And, you tell someone you need to eat fruits and vegetables, and they register that. I mean, everyone somewhat accepts at least that you need vegetables. They tend to argue about fruit, which is utterly ridiculous. But, I tell someone you need to eat fruits and vegetables, and then they come back to see me and they haven't lost any weight, and I'm looking through their diet log and I don't see any fruits or vegetables. And I'll take an example and I'll say, well, why, when it was snack time, did you have beef jerky instead of an apple? And they'll say, well, I needed to get my protein in their protein. Like, no matter what they do or no matter what they think, I mean, think about it. You go to a restaurant now and you order a salad, and now the thing is you order a salad and they say to you, what kind of protein would you like with your salad? It's like we're so obsessed with this word protein. We're absolutely addicted to it. And when I tell you it's bad for you, people don't accept it or don't believe there's anything wrong with eating too much protein. And so our whole country, they did a study where they're looking at our country. First of all, our country, if you look at the data, eats almost twice the RDA, the recommended daily allowance of protein, and yet the studies show that people are even looking to eat more protein. Like, we're eating way more protein than we could possibly ever need. You show people this and you show them the problems with this, and yet they just can't get through to them. Proteinaholic, because I really do think we're addicted.
The U.S. government's My Plate has like 3 food groups. I guess grains or starches and vegetables and fruit, and the fourth is protein, which is not a food, right? It's a nutrient.
Right. How crazy is that?
But we've all heard the debate about low carb versus low fat. So it seems like one of those should be low. We're not, as a country, we're not sure which. But there's no notion that that any amount of protein is too much. And you discovered that there is such a thing as too much protein, and it's rampant, right?
Yeah, the food plate is an interesting thing to me. It goes to show you the power of money and the power of the lobbyists, because it's that plate, and then there's a glass of milk, which is completely bizarre because there's just no studies that milk adds to longevity or that it adds to our health. And the fact that that the government is recommending that we have to get milk every day is just beyond bizarre. The plate, though, was a bit of improvement because at least it says protein and recommends, vegetable protein as a viable alternative because the prior food pyramid had meat rather than just protein. So they were taking steps in the right direction as far as that's concerned. But yeah, I mean, there's, too much of anything is probably going to be bad for you. And we found that too much protein, especially animal protein. And the fact with animal protein is too much may just be a little. Because even slight amounts of animal protein have shown to limit longevity, increase rates of cancer, increase hypertension, increase heart disease, the typical diseases that are killing America. Before I would have been confused by this, but now in retrospect and after all the research I've done, it's not surprising to me that heart diseases are leading cause of death and that cancer is rising and we can't seem to get it controlled because at least half of what we eat in a day comes from animals and animal protein, and that animal protein is, and I go into this quite a bit in the book, but is associated with the consumption of certain chemicals and which has a physiologic response in the body that leads to these disease processes.
Mm-hmm. So what do you hope someone's going to get out of reading Proteinaholic? What are they going to change or think or do differently?
Yeah, well, when I really get through to someone, when I really get them to understand this idea of excess protein, that we don't need the protein because everybody's so scared they're not going to get enough protein. They're so petrified of it. Once they're freed of this notion that they have to get a certain amount of protein and that they need to eat more protein, then all of a sudden they're able to make better food choices. And as they start making better food choices, they're going to get healthier. My hope is that I'd put myself out of business, that we wouldn't have this obesity problem, that I would put cardiologists out of business, that I would put gastroenterologists out of business, that a lot of these disease processes caused by Western medicine would get better, and that our environment would get better because nothing is worse for the environment than a animal-based agricultural system, and so I think the switch to a plant-based diet could be just vital for the future of our health and the health of our world.
Now, one thing that's different from you and a lot of other people that I've talked to and worked with is that you get to see it on a daily basis. Your practice is a proving ground. So you've seen people adopt the plant-based diet and make improvements, right?
Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen people adopt the high-protein diet. I used to put people on high-protein diets. I've seen people adopt plant-based diets. I don't make patients go vegan or vegetarian, but I definitely emphasize a huge change. My big motto is if you do what you always done, you get what you always got. So we go about trying to completely change the American plate because the American plate is, I always tell my patients, if you do what Americans generally do, you're going to get what Americans generally get. And Americans eat about half their foods from animal protein and half their foods from processed carbs, and they eat very little, possibly 5%, if that, from fruits and vegetables. And so what I try to do is make the plate mainly fruits, vegetables, beans, and grains, and just tell them if you're going to use meat or dairy that should be a condiment or just an additive. And when I've done this with patients, you see a huge relief in them, a huge success. First of all, everything seems to get better. It's not like you just lose weight but feel like crap, because people on really high protein Atkins type diets, they do lose weight in the beginning, but they feel horrible. On a plant-based diet, people are, God, I feel great. This is easy. This isn't hard. I feel fantastic. And then on top of that, their diabetes gets better, their high blood pressure gets better, their face is clearing up. It's like a whole change in their life, and it's really exciting to witness that that something so simple can have such a vast effect that it's very enjoyable to help someone reach that kind of change in their life.
Right on. So Proteinaholic comes out October 6th.
Comes out October 6th, and we're really hoping to, get a lot of people to buy this so that we can, work our way up on the New York Times bestseller list, because the more people that can get this book, the more people that could understand how much misinformation there is out there on the internet. My big worry is people are getting their information from non-experts or from people that are paid by the industry to tell them something different. And in so doing, they're getting confused and they're missing out on a truth that could be so vital to their health.
Right on. Dr. Garth Davis, thank you so much.
Thank you, Howard.